In 2025, Merseyside police estimate that around 120 gangs operate in and around Liverpool. These groups are not small-time crews, they are highly organized networks tied to the importation of cocaine and heroin, as well as the trade in illegal firearms. The National Crime Agency has gone as far as to say that Liverpool, outside of London, dominates the UK's drug and weapons trade. That reputation has made the city infamous, earning it the label of a gang capital, where street violence and international smuggling intersect. Liverpool is a city with two very different faces. On one side, it is celebrated around the world for its culture, its music and its football. It is the home of the Beatles, of Anfield and Goodison Park, and of a proud community with deep working-class roots. Tourists come here for the waterfront, the nightlife, and the history of a city that once stood at the heart of global trade. But beneath that vibrant image lies another Liverpool, one defined not by culture or celebration but by crime and fear. For decades, the city has been a battleground for organized gangs who have turned Merseyside into one of the most important hubs in the UK's criminal underworld. Drugs, firearms, and violence form a parallel identity that exists just as strongly as the city's music and football pride. This dual reality, one city with two identities, has left deep scars. While Liverpool's cultural image shines abroad, the communities within it are haunted by a series of brutal killings, many of which remain unsolved. Families wait for justice, but the silence of witnesses and the sophistication of these gangs mean that answers rarely come. In this episode, we'll step into the shadowed side of Liverpool. We'll look at the cases that define its violent legacy, the unsolved murders that still hang over the city, and how organized crime has written itself into the story of Merseyside. By the way, if you have enjoyed the story so far, please don't forget to subscribe, like and share this video as it will encourage us to create more videos on UK organized crime. To understand Liverpool's present gang crisis, we have to trace its roots back through the decades. The city's underworld didn't appear overnight. It was built, layer by layer, through waves of drugs, violence and organized crime that reshaped entire neighborhoods. In the 1980s, Liverpool gained an infamous nickname, Smack City. Heroin flooded through the docks, saturating the streets with addiction and despair. The drug wasn't just destroying lives, it was creating empires. Turf wars erupted as rival crews battled for control of the trade. Violence became routine, and names like Tommy Comer began to echo in headlines as he carved out influence in Merseyside's drug scene. A few years later, another figure would rise from these same streets, Curtis Warren, a man who built an international reputation as one of Britain's most notorious drug traffickers. Warren's reach extended far beyond Liverpool, but his story began in the chaotic underbelly of Smack City. By the 1990s and 2000s, a new generation of gangs was emerging. One of the most feared was the Heighton Firm, a group known for escalating the violence with planned grenade and gun attacks on their rivals. These weren't isolated scuffles. They were coordinated campaigns of intimidation designed to crush opposition and solidify dominance. Their methods shocked even hardened detectives, who described the brutality as a new chapter in Liverpool's gang warfare. Fast forward to the 2020s and law enforcement finally got a glimpse behind the curtain of this criminal world thanks to EncroChat, an encrypted phone network once believed to be unbreakable. When investigators cracked the system, they uncovered just how deeply entrenched Liverpool was in the UK's drug and arms trade. Messages revealed drug shipments worth millions, firearms trafficking and hit orders, all tied back to Merseyside. The revelations confirmed what authorities had long suspected. Liverpool wasn't just part of the trade, it was at the very heart of it. Over time, the pattern has remained chillingly consistent. Drugs fuel money, money fuels weapons, weapons fuel fear, and fear fuels silence. It's a cycle that has allowed gangs to flourish, murders to go unsolved, and communities to live under the shadow of intimidation. Liverpool's reputation as a drug capital is only half the story. Alongside the endless flow of cocaine and heroin, another trade has thrived in the shadows: illegal firearms. For gangs looking to defend their territory or eliminate rivals, guns became as essential as the drugs themselves. The supply chains often ran together. Shipments of cocaine arriving from South America didn't just bring narcotics, they also brought weapons hidden in the same routes. Smugglers understood that controlling the drug market meant nothing without firepower to back it up. From pistols to submachine guns, Liverpool's underworld stocked an arsenal capable of turning its streets into battle zones. By the time law enforcement caught up, the scale was staggering. When investigators gained access to encrypted EncroChat messages, they discovered that over 70% of seized firearms in the UK could be linked back to Merseyside. That meant Liverpool wasn't just using weapons, it was supplying them to the rest of the country, fueling violence far beyond its own borders. But perhaps more damaging than the guns themselves is the silence they create. Liverpool's gang culture thrives on what locals call the no-grass code. Speaking to the police, giving evidence, naming names, can mean signing your own death warrant. Fear of retaliation has silenced countless witnesses, leaving detectives without the testimony they need to bring killers to justice. The result is a painful cycle. Families appeal for answers, mothers plead for closure, communities gather in grief, but the killers vanish back into the underworld, protected by fear. Each unsolved case reinforces the power of silence, reminding the city that in Liverpool's gangland, guns don't just end lives, they erase the truth. Behind every headline about Liverpool's gangs is a family left in mourning, and a crime that too often goes unanswered. These cases are not isolated incidents. They are part of a wider pattern where fear, silence, and the ruthless efficiency of organized crime ensure justice rarely comes. Take the case of Sam Rimmer in 2022. Sam was just 22 years old, visiting friends in Dingle on a warm August evening. He wasn't in a gang and he wasn't armed. But when two men on electric bikes pulled into the street and opened fire with a submachine gun, Sam was the one who fell. Struck in the chest, he died despite efforts to save him. Detectives believe the shooters had been circling for hours looking for rivals, but Sam was caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. 10 arrests have been made, yet no charges have followed. Even with a £20,000 reward on the table, silence still surrounds his death. 4 years earlier, in 2018, Leroy Otuwe stepped out of a taxi outside his home in Wavertree. Within moments, a gunman opened fire, leaving him fatally wounded. Witnesses reported a dark Audi fleeing the scene, and hours later police found the vehicle burned out, a familiar tactic used to erase evidence. 2 men were arrested, but both were released and the murder remains unsolved. Otuwe's case shows how precision planning, fast cars, quick getaways, and intimidation shields killers from accountability. That same year, Carl Russell was executed in broad daylight while sitting in a car with his girlfriend in Belle Vale. The gunman, described as wearing a high-visibility orange jacket, approached calmly and fired 4 rounds through the car window. The brazenness of the attack shocked the community, yet despite arrests, the shooter has never been caught. Russell's death stands as an example of how gangland killings are carried out as public warnings, designed to send a message of power and fear. In 2017, Ellison was walking home after a night out in Prescott when a confrontation with men on a scrambler bike turned deadly. One of them stabbed him in the neck, killing him within hours. Adam was 29 years old, with no ties to the underworld. His case shows how ordinary disagreements can spiral into gang-related violence when weapons are involved, and how even innocent victims are swallowed by the silence of those who know the truth. That same summer, 18-year-old Yousef Sonko was chatting with friends on Tega Street in Toxteth when a gunman on a pedal bike fired into the group. Yousef was struck in the head and died on the spot. Police believe the attack was meant for someone else, but Yousef became another casualty of mistaken identity. For his parents, the pain is sharpened by the knowledge that their son's death could have been prevented, and that those responsible still walk free. Another chilling case came in February 2017, when Aaron Lewis, a 26-year-old bricklayer and former junior kickboxing champion, was gunned down after buying food from a chip shop. Witnesses said he was hit by up to 8 bullets. 2 firearms were recovered, a 9mm handgun and a .44 caliber revolver, but arrests went nowhere. Aaron's father later spoke of the unbearable torment of watching the killers remain free, a reminder that in Liverpool's gangland, violence is often met with impunity. And perhaps one of the most infamous unsolved cases of all, the murder of Lucy Hargreaves in 2005. The 22-year-old mother of 3 was at home in Walton when 3 masked men burst through her door. They shot her with a sawn-off shotgun before setting the house on fire to destroy evidence. Her partner escaped upstairs with their youngest child, but Lucy never made it out. Detectives have long suspected she was not the intended target, that her partner, linked to a local crew, was the one the killers came for. But almost 2 decades later, the case remains unsolved, one of the UK's most brutal and haunting gangland killings. These stories, from Sam Rimmer to Lucy Hargreaves, illustrate more than individual tragedies. They highlight the recurring patterns of Liverpool's underworld: innocents caught in the crossfire, planned executions meant to intimidate, and a wall of silence that protects the guilty. Each family continues to appeal for justice, but as long as fear outweighs truth, these murders risk fading into history without resolution. When you step back from the individual cases, a darker truth begins to emerge. These murders aren't random, they follow chillingly familiar patterns. Each killing fits into a cycle that has come to define Liverpool's gangland. Cycles of mistaken identity, revenge, silence, and devastation for the families left behind. Mistaken identity has claimed far too many lives. Before we continue, don't forget that what you are watching took us hours of both research, editing, and voicing to able to get it across to you. We plead that you show us your support by just subscribing to this channel and liking this video, as it will encourage us to create more video like this. Thank you. In 2017, Yousef Sonko, just 18 years old, was gunned down in Toxteth while talking with friends. Detectives later confirmed he wasn't the target. The shooter had aimed for someone else. The same tragedy unfolded in the case of Craig Eaton, a hospital worker shot in Kensington in 2004. He had no connection to gangs, but his killers believed he was someone else. These deaths show how quickly innocent people can become collateral damage when gangland feuds spill into the open. Then there are the revenge cycles, where one killing sparks another, feeding a chain reaction of bloodshed. In 2010, Paul Pike was murdered in his van at traffic lights, a hit thought to be linked to tit-for-tat shootings between rival crews. 8 years later, Carl Russell was executed in front of his girlfriend in Belle Vale, another suspected act of retribution. These killings aren't just punishments, they're messages, violent demonstrations that loyalty is rewarded, betrayal is fatal, and enemies will be hunted down. Equally damaging is the intimidation of witnesses. Few cases reveal this better than the 2003 killing of Andrew Jones, a 18-year-old beaten to death on Hanover Street. 9 key witnesses refused to name his attacker in court, despite knowing who was responsible. The coroner openly accused them of shielding a murderer, yet fear won out over justice. It's a reflection of Liverpool's entrenched no-grass culture, where speaking out can mean retaliation and silence is a survival tactic. But behind every statistic and every unsolved file are families destroyed. Parents like the Sonkos, who still beg for information about their son's killer. Mothers like Carol Cummins, who pleads for justice in the Murder in the Mist that claimed her son Joey in 2011. Fathers like the Lewises, left with only grief and unanswered questions. Their appeals are heartbreaking reminders that these aren't just stories of crime, they're stories of lost futures, of children who will never come home, and of wounds that do not heal. These patterns, mistaken identity, revenge cycles, silence, and grief, are what give Liverpool's gangland its terrifying power. They ensure that violence repeats itself, that justice remains elusive, and that entire communities live under the shadow of fear. Until these cycles are broken, the list of unsolved murders will only grow longer. Liverpool's gangs don't just operate in backstreets and housing estates, they have built networks that stretch far beyond Merseyside, making the city a key player in global organized crime. For decades, criminal ties have linked Liverpool to Ireland, with long-standing connections between Merseyside crews and Irish cartels. These alliances have helped smuggle tons of cocaine and heroin through ports, using routes that blur the line between local gang violence and international trafficking. Further afield, links to Spain have been crucial. The Costa del Sol, long dubbed the Costa del Crime, became a haven for fugitives and drug traffickers. Liverpool figures use Spain not only as a base for operations but also as a safe ground when heat from UK police became too much. The brutal fate of Francis Brennan in 2014 proved just how dangerous those overseas ties could be. Brennan was abducted by men posing as police near Alicante. Weeks later, his battered body washed up on a beach, wrapped in plastic. Investigators believe he was murdered over a drug debt, a chilling sign that Merseyside disputes could end in Spanish executions. The reach extends even further. Gangs from Liverpool have been documented working with suppliers in South America, cutting deals for cocaine shipments that arrive directly through European ports. The scale of these operations shows that Merseyside isn't just a customer of the global drug trade, it's a key distributor, plugged into the same networks that supply major cities across Europe. Even in Russia and Eastern Europe, Liverpool criminals have forged connections. Intelligence reports suggest collaborations with syndicates who specialize in arms trafficking, creating pipelines for cheap pistols and converted automatic weapons that eventually end up on UK streets. These alliances strengthen the gang's firepower and make them harder to dismantle. At the heart of this network are cross-border cartels and hired hit squads. Murder isn't confined to Liverpool streets, it follows those who fall foul of their associates abroad. When debts are unpaid or loyalty is questioned, violence is ordered from a distance, carried out with military precision. These transnational ties mean that Liverpool's gangland killings are not just local tragedies, but part of a much larger web of international crime. Liverpool may appear as a single city on a map, but its underworld operates without borders. And for those caught in its grip, the danger doesn't end at the River Mersey, it stretches across continents. The long list of unsolved murders in Liverpool is not a reflection of apathy or lack of effort from investigators. It is the result of a perfect storm of fear, sophistication, and mistrust that makes solving these cases extraordinarily difficult. The first and most obvious barrier is community fear. In neighborhoods scarred by gang violence, speaking to police is seen as a death sentence. The no-grass culture is more than a slogan, it is a survival mechanism. Families know that retaliation is real, and those who dare to testify risk violent retribution. In this climate, silence is safer than justice. Then there is the sophistication of the gangs themselves. These are not impulsive street fights, they are carefully orchestrated hits. Killers use burned-out getaway cars, mask their identities and plan escape routes with precision. In recent years, encrypted communication tools like EncroChat have made their operations even harder to penetrate, with orders for killing sent in coded language across secure networks. By the time evidence surfaces, it has often been destroyed, concealed, or buried in layers of digital secrecy. Adding to the challenge are the international connections shielding the masterminds. Many of Liverpool's biggest players don't even reside in the city. They direct operations from abroad, whether in Spain, the Netherlands, or South America. They have the resources to move, hide, and replace operatives, making it nearly impossible for police to trace responsibility back to the real power brokers. Finally, there is the problem of distrust between police and working-class communities. For decades, many residents have felt targeted or alienated by law enforcement, which fuels reluctance to cooperate. Without strong community ties, detectives often face closed doors and silent witnesses. This gulf between residents and authorities allows gangs to dominate neighborhoods, filling the vacuum with intimidation and control. Together, these forces create the conditions where murders remain unsolved, not because they are invisible but because they are protected by a system of fear, planning, and power that keeps the truth just out of reach. Behind every statistic and headline, there are families broken by grief, families who still wake up each morning waiting for answers that never come. For the parents of Yousef Sonko, who was just 18 when he was shot in Toxteth, the pain is constant. Years later, they continue to plead for someone, anyone, to step forward with the truth about who pulled the trigger. The same is true for the loved ones of Sam Rimmer, gunned down in Dingle in 2022, and Adam Ellison, stabbed during a chance encounter in Prescott. Their names appear in police appeals and press reports, but for their families they are not case files. They are sons, brothers, and friends whose futures were stolen. The grief is made even heavier by the psychological effect on entire communities. In many parts of Liverpool, the unwritten rule of don't talk shapes everyday life. People carry the weight of knowing who was involved in crimes but stay silent out of fear of retaliation. Living under that shadow breeds anxiety, mistrust, and resignation. Children grow up seeing silence as the safest response, learning that justice is dangerous to pursue. Over time, this silence doesn't just protect killers, it corrodes the fabric of neighborhoods, leaving scars that go far beyond the crime scene. And so, the cycle continues. Poverty and deprivation funnel new recruits into gang life, offering them what looks like a way out: quick money, respect, and a sense of belonging. But in reality, it is a trap that leads to violence, prison, or the grave. With one generation lost to drugs, prison sentences, or unsolved murders, the next often follows the same path, caught in the gravitational pull of Liverpool's underworld. This is the human toll of gang violence in Merseyside. It is not just the bodies left on the streets, it is the mothers who never stop grieving, the children who grow up in silence, and the neighborhoods locked in a cycle of fear and poverty. Until these wounds are addressed, the city's dual identity, vibrant culture on one side, violent underworld on the other, will remain painfully intact. For Liverpool to move beyond its gangland legacy, the cycle of violence and silence must be broken. That requires action on multiple fronts: law enforcement, community engagement, and tackling the root causes that fuel organized crime. From the police perspective, progress has already been made with the use of advanced technology. The EncroChat busts proved that even the most secretive networks can be infiltrated, exposing the dealings of top-tier criminals. Improved forensic science, from ballistics tracing to DNA recovery, also gives detectives tools to connect weapons and suspects across multiple crime scenes. These advances show that gangs are not untouchable, but they also highlight that enforcement alone cannot solve the problem. From the community perspective, rebuilding trust is vital. Too many residents believe that speaking up puts their lives at risk and that police cannot protect them if they do. This mistrust is the foundation of the no-grass culture. To counter it, police and community leaders must create channels for safe, anonymous reporting, and demonstrate that informants will be protected. Justice can only work when people feel secure enough to speak the truth. And at the societal level, the roots of the problem must be addressed. Liverpool's poverty and deprivation provide fertile ground for gangs to recruit new members. Young men with few opportunities are drawn in by the promise of money, respect, and protection. To cut off this supply line, the city must invest in alternatives to gang life, education, jobs, apprenticeships, mentorship programs, and safe community spaces that provide young people with a future that doesn't involve drugs or violence. Breaking the cycle isn't about one measure, it's about combining them. Technology to expose the gangs. Trust to protect the witnesses. Opportunity to prevent the next generation from joining. Only by bringing these three forces together can Liverpool begin to heal the scars of its violent past and prevent future tragedies from being written into its streets. Liverpool's story cannot be told through football chants, music, or culture alone. Behind the roar of Anfield and the legacy of the Beatles lies a darker narrative, a city scarred by decades of gangland violence. The same streets that celebrate life and creativity also carry the silence of unsolved murders, each one a reminder of the lives cut short and the justice that has never come. The killings of Sam Rimmer, Lucy Hargreaves, and Yousef Sonko are not just isolated tragedies. They are part of a larger wound that stretches across Liverpool, leaving families broken and communities fearful. Each unsolved case reinforces the power of fear, keeping truth buried and killers hidden in plain sight. Yet justice is not beyond reach. These murders can still be solved, but only if the wall of silence is broken, if communities find the courage to speak, and if the cycle of fear is finally dismantled. For Liverpool to heal, it must confront its underworld as openly as it celebrates its culture, refusing to let intimidation define its future. If you believe in shining a light on these stories and keeping the pressure alive, then help us continue this work. Subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, and share this video. Every voice that speaks out against the silence brings us one step closer to justice for the families who still wait, and one step closer to ending the cycle of violence that has haunted the city for far too long.